Today I'm going to be interviewing Nancy Wilmot from The Scoop on Port Alberni. I'm Heather Ramsay, and you're watching HTV. You work with media. How long have you been doing that?
Oh my gosh. I began working in media about 25 years ago. And before that, to be honest, I had never considered working on television, although I had volunteered with Shaw for a couple of months anyway, before I was hired.
What made you want to do that?
Oh, that's a big question. I was a stay-at-home mom in Port Alberni. I had been home with my kids for a couple of years. And at that time, 25 years ago, this community was really going through a transition. And because of my previous work experience, I had given some motivational talks in the company I was working for in California, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I felt like, I knew that there was something that could be shared. There was a huge strike at the mill. There were massive layoffs, and almost everybody I met was either out of work or about to be out of work and looking for a new way to invent themselves, to be themselves. And I felt like, I could put together a workshop for that. So I went to Parks and Recreation and I pitched the idea to them. And they said, okay, put together a program and we'll put it in our schedule for spring. And I was so excited about it. On the way home, I happened to turn past Shaw Cable and I thought, I bet you that'd be a TV show. And on a whim, I came in and at that time met the two programmers here, Franco and Darren, and the rest is history. I never did do the Parks and Recreation program, by the way. I just worked here.
What's your favorite part of media?
Some people love it because of the technical aspect of it. I loved the storytelling aspect, the meeting people, the getting to know them very quickly and telling their story. I didn't know how much I would love that, but I did just fall in love with it.
Does anyone inspire you or help you?
Does anybody inspire me? Oh my gosh, that's a good question. And the truth is that I don't know that it's necessarily people that work in television or in media, but it's some of the great storytellers, that I've known. And I grew up in a family of storytellers. My mom, my dad, my aunts and uncles. It was always storytelling time. You met people and you kind of told their story and told each other's stories. And so when I think of who inspires me, it would be writers or poets or just storytellers. It's funny, but I don't know if that translates to media, but that's what media is. I mean, we just tell stories.
How does it help you in media?
That storytelling aspect? Oh my goodness. So much of what you do in media is either like this, which is a little bit more staged and you're doing a longer format, but you're getting me to tell my story and you're shaping it with your questions. And what I did for a lot of my career was one-on-one interviews that I would take back and edit and tell that person's story. And so if you read a lot, if you listen to storytellers a lot, you can take that 20-minute conversation you've had with somebody about, I don't know, their Avon bottle collection and distill it down to 2.5 minutes that mean something, because you can find the core of the story, and what they're really talking about isn't, I don't know, their Avon bottle collection, but their relationship to their father who used to wear aftershave, and that's why they, there's always a story, and they're universal stories. So that's how it's always helped me, it's always inspired me.
How do the different jobs in media help tell that story?
Oh, that's a very good question, because I mentioned that prior to working in community programming in television, I had worked with in a company and I had done some motivational speaking, but I had always thought I would be a writer. I had gone to school, I'd studied English and political science, I had written a fair bit at one time in my life. And when I started working in television, I realized that there were no words that I could come up with that could tell a story like this, somebody's voice choking or their eyes tearing up a little bit. That tells a story better than any words any writer will ever come up with. And so the different jobs, the cameraman, the editor, the audio, all of it comes together to tell that story in a way that until you work in that medium, you you don't understand. I never knew it. I never knew it at all. But yeah, so they all come together. And the other thing is that I never understood until I worked in it that all of these jobs, like the camera, the editor, the director, every single one of them is as important as the person who is on the air. They're all part of telling the story, of making it come to life after the fact.
How have these skills helped you in your daily life?
That's interesting. Or how the fact that I am a storyteller and that I worked as a storyteller and continue to work as a storyteller for so many years, they've blended together so much. I don't even know anymore, except when you are a storyteller and you work in television, and as I did, one-on-one with people doing interviews, you just want to cut to the nub of things. You don't want to make small talk. You don't want to talk about the weather. You want to meet somebody, look them in the eye, and ask something that really means something and that is personal. I think that's helped me or urged me to live a more authentic life, to not make the small talk that means nothing, but to try and be honest about things and to be real. Because when you're interviewing someone, when you're telling their story, that's what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to be vulnerable and to be honest. And in order to do that, you have to be vulnerable and honest yourself. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What's your favorite type of thing to film?
I love telling the hidden story that people don't recognize. I love going into a situation where you think you've booked something that is very small or is insignificant, and then you dig into it and you realize, no, there is something so deep and profound here. And it's happened to me dozens of times over the years. And it humbles me at people's human experience. I think going into this, I, like many people, thought that the big stories were when you get to interview the premier or a major celebrity. And those are not the big stories at all. The big story is, again, I'm going to tear up. It's a senior living on her own who had big dreams and maybe and finding out those dreams and finding out the challenges and the victories in that person's life those are the big stories that I love telling.
Do you have any advice for people wanting to be involved in this?
Well, do I have advice? If it's doing the kind of job that you're doing, being in front of the camera, I would urge them to be authentic and be vulnerable. And at one point, I worked occasionally at ADSS, and I would give workshops. At that time, they were producing something called ABC News. And I would go in and give a workshop with the hosts, the students who were hosting the daily news show. And what I would always tell them is that this isn't about the clothes you wear or the makeup or your hair or how beautiful or not beautiful you think you are. The only job you have to do is to be authentic and to be real, so that whoever is watching you on that television screen sees someone that wants to see them. So for this job, for being on television, that's what I would say, is be authentic and be vulnerable. For the other jobs, because as you know, doing this, you have to do them all. You just have to be very good and be forgiving and be patient. Yeah, it's easy when you're doing the technical parts to be impatient with whoever is in front of the camera, but you can't be. You're part of a team. You're working with that person, and if it takes 27 takes to get an intro out, you need to be patient with them and work with them. It's an exciting career. Whatever you're doing in television is so exciting, whether you're working the camera, whether you're editing, whether you're directing or working the audio board or doing lights. It is an exciting and relevant career. And yeah, I almost wish I was starting over again.
How would someone get started?
That's a good question. So this is a great way to get started. Volunteering with community programming, like Rogers Community Programming, is a great way to get started. But there are wonderful community college and university programs to get involved in. there's training, but really hands-on training is the very best. Yeah.
What's your favorite part of your job?
Of my job now?
And just working with media in general?
Just being out there in the community. Just being able to go out, I see something interesting, I can stop my car, grab my camera, and go out and tell that story. So I love that. And it gets you involved in the community and with what's going on in a different way. You're no longer a bystander. You're a part of everything that's going on. So I do love that. And as I said, the storytelling. I love the storytelling. Yeah.
What's the most challenging parts?
Getting everything done to a deadline, always working to a deadline. And in many jobs, you feel like, okay, if I can just get through this week, I'm done. There's always a pileup. You're always working to a deadline. And so that can be challenging. You have to really enjoy that. Somebody once described it to me as a sausage machine where you're always turning a crank and turning something out. And it's true, you've always got to get things ready, the ingredients ready for the next sausage. You've got to be turning the crank on the sausage you're making. And then, it's gone. So cranking out stories, cranking out content is like that. You just always have to be thinking ahead and in the present, and then let it go. Learn from what you've done. It's on and gone.
How do you overcome the obstacles?
If you love what you do, you just overcome them. And people handle stress. They handle deadlines in different ways. I think if you love what you do, you just keep going and you find your own pace. There is a pace in this business that you kind of settle into. And for instance, at one time I was involved in producing 10-minute segments. And you get into a rhythm, and I could crank out those 10-minute segments, 7 to 10-minute segments. And we moved to a 3 to 5-minute format. And that was a big transition to learn to cut down. So doing 3 to 5 minutes. But man, if somebody asked me to do a 10-minute segment, it was hard because I was out of that rhythm. And I don't know how to explain that, except you find a rhythm that works for you best when you're doing something. And that is true for editing or shooting something, but it's also true in planning your week. You know what your rhythm is going to be. If your producer says that you need two 5-minute segments a week, you find the best way for yourself and you settle into that and find a workflow. Even though many media situations, your workflow would have to fit a producer's schedule, your workflow still is the same. How you ingest the content, how you shoot it, what is the most efficient way to get it done. And you just have to, you have to love it.
Do you have any stories from your time in media?
Do I have stories from my time in media? That might take me a bit of time to think about because I have many, many stories. But you know what? Most of them are just involving the people. And the people I worked with and the people I got to interact with. There's something about being one-on-one with a person when you turn on the camera and the lights, if you have lights, and you've got them hooked with a microphone, that things fall away and it's a heightened reality. And so you form a relationship with that person you're talking to that they never forget. And so many of my stories would just be about the connection I was blessed to be able to make with people in such a short period of time. And that's just been wonderful. Oh, and Totem. There's lots of stories about Totem too.
Now you started your own local media group, The Scoop.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that?
The Scoop on Port Alberni. Absolutely. I was wondering when you were going to get to that, Heather Ramsay. Because when my time working in community programming came to an end, I wasn't ready to quit. And I was lucky enough to have two friends. One of them is your dad, Michael Ramsay, and the other one is Terry Deacon, who are, between the two of them, brilliant at coming together and coming up with plans and putting them in motion. And they knew that I wasn't ready to quit. And I've always believed in the value of local media, of local stories told locally. And they came up with a way to create an independent media company. The company is called Alberni Valley Media. We're a CCC, that's a Community Contribution Corporation. It's a crazy word, it's unwieldy, but what it means is that we are incorporated as a business, and if we ever make any profit, we have to give 60% of it minimal away to the community. So we get to operate as a social enterprise in ways. We shoot my 3-minute segments. I shoot and edit and release 5 a week online under the title The Scoop on Port Alberni. So you can find us on Facebook or on YouTube or on our website. And it's working, and it's so much fun.
How did you start it?
How did we start it? So between the three of us, we were able to purchase equipment. The setup costs are minimal because we don't need a startup, or we don't need a storefront, and we have platforms available. So we really just needed a website. We hired a website designer. I began shooting and releasing stories on Facebook, and we went out to find sponsors. And that was the scary part for me. It still is a bit scary. But I went out to 2 people that I'd worked with closely over the years, Aaron Vicia of Aaron Vicia Financial, and Dave Kazagi of the Kazagi Group Real Estate. And I spoke to them individually and said, do you think this would work? And do you think sponsors would sign on? And each of them individually, before we got to the end of the conversation, said, okay, let's get rid of the elephant in the middle of the room. We're in. And they became my first sponsors, and I'm so grateful. And since then, others have come on. So we sell sponsorship, we sell advertising, and by golly, it's going to work.
How do you find all the people to help in the community?
How do I find stories? Oh, Heather, I've got stories backed up from months. I could shoot from now until September and not run out of stories just with the emails I've got right now. So it's great. It's great fun that way because people already knew me and because we're developing a presence online. And it's also true that I can hop in my car and drive around and see something and just start shooting. In fact, last night we released a story because I drove by some tree planters who were replanting the area next to Alberni Valley Memorial Gardens, next to the cemetery. And I saw a tree planter, so I got out with a camera and we were able to release that scoop. And that's the kind of thing that we can do. And it's so much fun.
What are the types of videos that the Scoop makes?
So we do ultra local, so only Port Alberni, although we could branch out a little bit in the regional district. Stories that might be considered human interest stories, so event coverage. One of our camera people here right now, Gerald DeBute, volunteers for me and covers many weekend events for me. So a story on the Rock and Gem Club, on the Rock and Gem show rather, or Scouts Night, Race Night, things like that, or newsier stories if something is happening within the city that I think needs clarification or that they would like clarification on. Informational, and we decided from the very beginning we were going to provide information and we weren't going to slant it. So if we're providing information on something that is controversial, we don't take a side on it. We just give the information and as much as possible give it in a level way, offering that to both sides if there are 2 sides to it, and then we release it. And again, that's something I certainly learned from years in community programming. It's not a soapbox for us, it's a voice for the community. Yeah.
Where can people watch it?
Okay, go to Facebook, The Scoop on Port Alberni. Please follow us. The more followers, the better. YouTube, The Scoop on Port Alberni, or the very best place is our website, www.thescooponportalberni. And I say that because there's more information. We do have community calendar information and little bits and pieces. But any 3, if you just go to any search engine and type in The Scoop on Port Alberni, you'll find us.
Do you have any plans for the Scoop?
To make it pay for itself, to make it sustainable. Ideally, because all 3 of us involved, Michael, Terry, and myself, we all believe in the value of local independent media that would always belong to Port Alberni. So our goal would be to make it sustainable so that when I do retire, it is sustainable and there would be 2 or more employees who could always cover and release stories in the Alberni Valley for the Alberni Valley. I think all media is struggling to find a way to remain relevant, to remain feasible as the whole media landscape changes. And we think this will work. We hope this will work.
Do you have any plans to do that?
To retire?
No.
Don't even say retire.
No,
My goodness. To make it sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that involves just growing things and having enough to hire somebody. Just to make it financially sustainable first, and then to branch out. Yeah. I think that one of the first steps would be to have somebody regularly cover City Council. But we'll see. We will see.
Okay. What's your favorite part about working with the Scoop?
So when I came in, I was wearing a jacket that said The Scoop on Port Alberni on the back. And the other day I went into a coffee shop and I was standing in line, and a fellow behind me said, "Hey, are you with the Scoop?" And I turned around and said, "With the Scoop? I am the Scoop. Are you kidding?" And that's what I love. I love the recognition. I love laughing about it. And I just love being out there doing it.
You also helped me start HTV.
One of my favorite parts of working with community programming, absolutely.
Have you helped other volunteers?
Have I? Well, that's my job. So as community programmer, that is our job, to help somebody like yourself who has an idea, who wants to present that, whatever it is, that idea to the community, is to make it happen. So I've worked with so many. Gerald LeBute, the time traveler, he's behind the camera today. But really, we're just facilitators. It's you that makes it happen.
What's your favorite part about it?
About that part of I love working with volunteers. I love, over the years, following their careers. Early on, probably 20 years ago, we had a young fellow working here who was editing, and he's edited now in some very big name films. So he's a film editor and works with large teams. It's wonderful following people's progress and just seeing their excitement. I mean, it is a fun career. It is fun to do this. So it's just fun.
Do you have any advice for volunteers?
So my first advice would be to somebody watching this, if you think, I didn't know that they take volunteers, is contact your local community channel, because they do take volunteers. Step out of yourself, give it a go. It's scary, but try. And once you are in there, step out of your comfort zone a little bit. And if you think that, I don't know if I can do that, give it a try. Maybe you can, and maybe you'll just love it. So.
Have you always lived in Alberni?
No, I grew up in Manitoba on a farm. I've lived in Calgary. I went to university in Calgary. I lived in Halifax and just outside of Halifax. I've lived in Kamloops. I've lived in San Francisco. I lived on Mares Island for a year off Tofino, and now I'm here, all over the place.
What were your favorite places to live?
What were my every place was favorite. I long for the farm sometimes, for where I grew up. I loved San Francisco. I loved Halifax. I remember having an epiphany the first year we were living in San Francisco, because when you grow up in a small rural place, you think it's the end of the world. You just think it's like nothing ever happens here, and you just long to get out of it. And I remember we'd gone out for a drive just outside of San Francisco, and we were in a little place called Petaluma, and we went into a restaurant for coffee, and I looked around and I thought, oh my gosh, this looked like Alex's Cafe back in Erickson, Manitoba. And my epiphany was that it doesn't matter where you are, things are happening everywhere, whether you're in a tiny town in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, or if you're in San Francisco. Yeah, things are happening everywhere.
What's your favorite part about Alberni?
The people. I've just grown to love this community so well. And that really has to do with the relationships I've made here and the people. And yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. There's beauty everywhere. If you open your eyes, you can see beauty everywhere. But it has to be the people here.
Do you have any hobbies outside of camera work?
for years I was a quilter. I was a crazy quilter. I did a lot of sewing and quilting, but the creative juices that flow when you're shooting and editing and creating television kind of took over that. That sounds funny. I used to paint a lot. I still do write, but mainly I just create TV.
Is there anything else you would like to share?
Anything else I would like to share? Well, I'm just so proud of you, Heather Ramsay. You're doing great.
Thank you.
And it's really exciting to be interviewed by you, so thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you for watching HTV. I'm Heather Ramsay. See you next time.